And you're watching America's Forum right here on Newsmax TV. I'm John Bachman.
I'm J.D. Hayworth, and the lady with us, Newsmax correspondent Morgan Thompson. Morgan, it's great to have you back here.
Thank you so much. It's always great to be here. If I was going to ask you who your role model was growing up, I bet you might just say this man.
Son, since you haven't learned to respect your elders, it's time you learn to respect your betters.
Marion Mitchell Morrison, or John Wayne as he was known to most, was one of Hollywood's most famous and successful actors. He became a symbol of America itself, epitomizing in the Western film and representing the archetype many men would aspire towards. From very early on in his career, he identified with conservative political causes from the early 1979. But unlike fellow actor Ronald Reagan, Wayne had no interest in politics as a career. Like many stars, he altered his life story, claiming to have become an actor almost by accident, when in fact he had studied drama and aspired to act for most of his youth. He married 3 times, all to Latino women, and conducted a lengthy affair with Marlene Dietrich, as unlikely a romantic partner as anyone could imagine for the Duke. Wayne projected dignity, integrity, and strength in all his films. And even when his characters were flawed, and whatever character he played was always prepared to comfort injustice in its own way. More than 30 years after his death, he remains the standard by which male stars are judged, and an actor whose morally unambiguous films continue to attract sizable audiences.
And we are so pleased now to be joined on set by Scott Eyman, author of the biography, John Wayne, The Life and the Legend. Scott, we welcome you to America's Forum.
It's good to be here.
It is great to have you here, sir. And when we think of John Wayne, I think of that opening sequence establishing his identity, if you will, John Ford's Stagecoach. That almost a national monument as a young man, the way Ford photographed him.
The camera rushes into a close-up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a metaphor for John Wayne and just his presence on the screen?
Well, Ford devised the introduction because they'd been friends for 10 years at that point, and he'd never given him a starring role. So he wanted to give the kid, Duke, as everybody called him, he wanted to give Duke a great introduction, and it's such an unusual camera movement, and as Wayne cocks the rifle with one hand, which is a movement that Yakima Canutt suggested because Canutt had seen it done in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show years earlier. Ford's telling us that this guy merits our interest in a way that transcends the actual narrative of Stagecoach. This is a face that you're going to get used to. This is a face you need to get used to.
Talking about, his film iconography, and, he really is, like we said, representative of America itself. But you met the man himself, so tell me how he differs.
Well, son, since you haven't learned to respect your elders.
He was like that guy on the screen, and he was unlike the guy on the screen. He was huge. I mean, a normal-sized 6-foot guy could stand in back of John Wayne and you'd never see him. He was football lineman huge. But he was far more calm than he was on screen. He was far more thoughtful than he was on screen. He was almost philosophical, as a matter of fact. I didn't ask him about cancer. I didn't ask him about politics except once. And he got very assertive, almost like the screen character assertive. And he said, I hate politics and I hate politicians, except he threw in a certain word in front of politics and politicians to emphasize just how much he hated politics and politicians.
He'd been criticized for his politics his whole life. It was like he could kind of do no right when it came to politics, no matter what side. Well, he always took the same side, but it just seemed like he was always coming under fire for that.
Well, he was assertive. He put his money where his mouth was. He played a movie called Big Jim McLean, where he played an investigator for the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1952. Which was after, actually, the blacklist was starting to wind down, and a lot of people were having second thoughts about it, but he was saying that this was a good thing. He was saying it was a good thing, and he made the Alamo in 1960 with a lot of his own money, which ended up draining a lot of his own money, which he saw as a metaphor for the battle against communism, really. So he, and the Green Berets in 1968, at a time when the war was increasingly unpopular. So he was extremely assertive about putting his politics front and center.
Well,
it's interesting too, and I'm sorry, Morgan, just one thing I have to get in here, because I remember all the different reviews where critics, to be unkind, would always say John Wayne as John Wayne. as if he had no dramatic range. But you're telling us the guy off the screen was a different man from the on-screen persona.
John Wayne was the construction that Duke Morrison devised, piece by piece, brick by brick. As he put it, that's a character. You know, he said, "I play the man I would like to have been." He wasn't that man. He wanted to be that man in the same way that Cary Grant would have liked to have been Cary Grant. Nobody's that smooth, and nobody's quite as assertive and dominant in all situations as the John Wayne character could be on the screen. And he knew that. He was fairly self-aware about who he was and who John Wayne was.
You spoke football, lineman huge. Marion Morrison went to Southern Cal to be a center on the offensive line. Not noted for his football career. What happened? Injury or?
He was a star at Glendale High. That's how he got his scholarship to USC. He never would have been able to afford to go to college without a scholarship. The family was what we would now call lower middle class at best. But he was a very good lineman, and the Glendale team was an excellent team, all state. So he got the scholarship, and he was doing very well on the freshman team. And in his second year, he was rising up, and Howard Jones was going to promote him to the varsity. And then he went surfing because he was a big jock in any athletic activity he was up for. And a wave hit him and knocked him, and it really messed his shoulder up. And there wasn't much use for a lineman who couldn't block because his shoulder was all messed up. So he lost his scholarship, and he had to leave USC after 2 years.
Well, a lot of actors today, of course, can call on John Wayne's body of work to get influence and inspire them as well. You talked about the construction of John Wayne, the character. Where did those bricks come from when he was constructing John Wayne?
He had, a lot of it stemmed from kind of reverse reaction to his father. His father was emotionally accessible, very kind, very loving, and a failure. He could not support his family very well, had a great deal of difficulty in finding a niche for himself. And so Wayne was kind of drawn to men who were competent above all, who could handle any situation above all. It didn't matter if they were emotionally inaccessible. He didn't care. He was drawn to Howard Jones, his coach at USC, was one of those guys you could run for 250 yards for Howard Jones, and all you get is a nod. There was no hugs. There was
wasn't his
nothing
mother
like this.
cold and indifferent to
His
him
mother
at
was
times?
is very funny because his mother, when they separated, his parents separated, they later divorced. Marion Duke went to live with his father. His brother Bob went to live with his mother, and his mother took it to her grave that her oldest son had preferred to live with her father, and she much preferred Bob all her long life. After her son became a huge movie star and extremely wealthy, all she wanted to know is, what are you doing for Bob? Why isn't Bob making your pictures?
Wow.
She never gave him any credit or a pat on the back or anything, and it was really a destructive relationship, quietly destructive relationship.
Scott Eyman, we want to thank you very much for coming in to visit with us. The name of the book again, John Wayne, The Life and the Legend. There's a young Duke Morrison on the cover. I look forward to that read, and we want to thank you very much for stopping by, Scott. Good to have you today.
Thank you, sir.
Your thoughts on John Wayne, your thoughts on any topic we welcome, and you can get in touch with us via social media. You can tweet us via Twitter, of course, at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. Also, there is email, no electronic stamp needed. Our address, connect@newsmaxtv.com, and there's also Facebook. Stay with us.